Thank you, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I think the really good thing about this talk is that I don't have to talk about myself, and I'm here to represent this incredible group of young people called the Amche Citizens Campaign. And just to preface that, I wanted to say that I lived in the US and I worked over there for a while. And as an artist, you really come to understand or you come to realize that when you're doing your work, especially in the West, there is this idea of the individual spirit. And it is really a wonderful, endless tunnel of exploration because you can really explore yourself endlessly. And a lot of art does reflect that. But when I moved back to Goa, which is where my family is from, you kind of realize that you couldn't just do things your own way. And you immediately realize you're part of a family and it has a context and it has a history. And if you're an artist, identity becomes very important to the work that you do. And you can't avoid these histories and these contexts. So you start to understand that. And you realize that these are we're all part of, aside from being individuals, we're all part of institutions. They might be families, they might be societies. There are various structures in society, and you start to understand like how the roles that are like prescribed to you. And I started to understand, and my work started to shift. And as you start to explore these institutions that you belong to, and you kind of question and you critique them, you start to find that there are people also doing similar things. And actually, that's how I feel that I've noticed that communities build either to support these institutions or to kind of critique them or to respond to something new that has happened. And I think with the Amche Mole campaign, the self that was so important as an artist, I've learned that when you really belong to a society, and so much of what happens in Goa really connects to community. We live in villages. There's this requirement of, reducing the self. And so I'm going to try to talk about that. Um, so on June 20th, June 2020, like many of us woke up to scenes of a large scale deforestation, which is triggering for many Goans because we're seeing this happen everywhere, all over in our villages. Except this was on the outskirts of Mollem National Park. And it triggered an outcry, but it was during the lockdown. By November, it felt like the whole state was just aflame with protest. The really iconic image, if you know the campaign on the right, of 5,000 people occupying the railroad track, people from every walk of life coming together to say that due process was not taken in order for these forests to be cut. I joined the campaign a few days into it because I responded with this artwork to a small open call saying, if you love the forest and you remember Mole when you were young, you should do a drawing and just talk about the things that you love about it. And I think I was just one of hundreds and hundreds of people who responded with artwork. And we realized, I think, that there was potential for a campaign to happen. Because artists and scientists were involved in the youth group that was running the Amche Mole campaign, there was a collaboration between art and science, and it really showed the potential of images. Over here, what you saw in the previous image was a scientific paper which was 7 pages long, condensed into a single work that allowed us to then have a month-long series, a video series with a single drawing that would explain the detrimental problems of forest fragmentation, which is really the big threat to the Mole campaign. Slowly, we had campaigners coming on, people giving a lot of time to the movement, and we realized we needed something to hold us together. And so we made this little document called The Goals and Values of an Ideal Campaigner. And it really keeps us in check. It helps us to be self-reflective. It guides us when we don't know what we're doing and we're feeling a bit lost. Soon we worked with artists and scientists together, also with lawyers, which is, I think, the trifecta of the Molle campaign is art, science, and law, working non-hierarchically with each other to make these little explainers, to bring awareness to what the campaign does, and also what the scientific threats are, the problems of environmental impact assessments. All of these are like little explainers that we put up on Instagram because we were all under lockdown and nobody could gather on the streets. Today you find them in our zine library, and you can see they're usually like a hub of activity with people around. Now that the threat of COVID is slightly diminished, or rather significantly diminished from when we started. We also work with schools and young students. We take them into the forest. Both of these are two different schools that came to Goa, and we took them into Mollem campaign. I think what I really want to talk about is what the campaign does with art is that it enables really complex language and material to reach larger groups of people. And it also tells you that over here, if you can do anything and you can use your own skills, you can talk about something and you don't have to be an activist. You just have to be an active citizen. A really important part is we explain systems of governance because we feel that if we want to uphold the values that we believe in, we ourselves have to plug into democratic systems. And so we track legislative assembly sessions. We explain even what I didn't know what an MLA was actually really when I exactly what they did when I joined the campaign. And you can see leading up to the legislative assembly session, you have citizens um, talking about taking photographs and asking their legislative assembly members to raise questions about about the forest and about the deforestation. So when we got to the floods in Goa that happened in 2021, we were actually able to like really plug into the system of legislation by connecting the deforestation to the climate crisis and really saying that if you want to be a representative of the people, you need to value this in your sessions in legislative assembly. We also use citizen journalism. We use anyone can contribute. So while a scientist started to explain the connections between deforestation and flooding, we also got citizens from different parts of the affected areas and from different news hubs to share these pictures. And it was a really helpful way to give a name to the places that were affected by the floods, which are usually like forgotten by the mainstream media channels. I'd like to end by talking about one project. This is called the Case of the Missing Species. And it was talking about faulty environmental impact assessments. And many species, including the gore, which is a state animal, was left out. So if you have faulty environmental impact assessments, how that don't include the state animal, how do you go with it? And so we had postcards that people could learn about these species that were neglected, and on the other side, write to their local representatives. And it formed a public interaction and also a sculpture that we were kind of making in the park in Garcia de Horta. So you could come up to this community table and you could read about what is happening, know your projects, important information. And I think a really important thing is we made an open source address book of all the legislative members of Goa, and you could just find your village and find their address. And here is a picture of people from everywhere coming together to draw at the table, to work on the Zine library, to write postcards and letters to their MLAs, also to the prime minister, to the chief minister, talking about the railway track, which had been scrapped by the Supreme Court, which is an important victory for us. But the railways were anyway continuing with their process. And so this was the end result of coming together of a lot of people and a sculpture in the park using art, but in it is a message, important messages, important scientific material, and all sorts of um, processes that come together in our society, which has many layers to it. And yes, I think our work still continues, and it's been a really incredible process of being over here. Thanks a lot.